Hi, my name is Ethan White, and my group did The City as a Work of Art, London, Paris, Vienna. I'll be focusing on London and how the city was a deliberate artistic creation intended not merely to give pleasure, but to contain ideas, instill values, and serve as tangible expressions of systems of thought and morality. The British Empire was the largest colonial empire in the world. Spanning across most of the world, the British were one of the strongest empires. The British conquered land on every continent of the world, coining the phrase, "the sun never sets on the British Empire." The empire was the world's largest global power and therefore leaving its language and culture legacy across the globe and inspiring many other cultures. The map depicts the expanse and the colonies of the British Empire in 1783. The capital of the British Empire was London, which was the world center for trade, banking, culture, and wealth. Located in present-day United Kingdom, London is still one of the largest cities in the world and is the capital of the United Kingdom. And this map shows present-day England, and London is located in the southeast part of the United Kingdom. The city of London reached far outside the city center, just the smaller towns that surrounded the center. The population continued to grow as the economy in the city grew. London was the capital of the British Empire and the center for trade, culture, the economy, and wealth. London is made up of many districts. The main three are the City of London, the original city, the suburb of Southwark, and Westminster. Each had its own importance to the larger city, but the city was a center for trade, banking, and royalty. And John Roquet's map depicts London in 1746. This map of London shows the expansion of London over time. Dates are placed in areas when they were constructed, stemming from the medieval city to the upper class homes to the docks. Gothic architecture in Middle Ages in London. There were two main movements of Gothic architecture in London: Gothic architecture of the Middle Ages and Gothic revival, which took place in the 19th century. Gothic architecture came about because of the improvement of engineering, which allowed for larger buildings. Gothic architecture used rib vaults, flying buttresses, and pointed arches to construct tall structures, while allowing large windows to let in light. Stained glass windows with tracery were used to let in large amounts of light to create a holy space and to illuminate the large space. Gothic architecture in England spanned from 1180 to about 1500, much longer than the rest of continental Europe. In London, Gothic architecture was used to construct large cathedrals and abbeys, most notably Westminster Abbey, one of the more notable cathedrals of the time, which encapsulates Gothic architecture. Westminster Abbey is shown in the image on the left, and an extension of the cathedral is Henry VII Chapel, which is pictured on the right. The Gothic revival movement took place in the 19th century. The revival did not change the original Gothic architecture, but romanticized it. This was a response to the Enlightenment and a way of attracting people towards the church. Instead of using the flying buttresses and rib vaults for structure, the aspects of Gothic architecture were used as picturesque qualities, opposing the original idea of Gothic architecture. Palladian architecture in England. Palladian architecture came from the Italian architect Andrea Palladio, who was influenced by Roman and Greek architecture and mainly Vitruvius. Palladio wrote the 4 books of architecture, his architecture treatise that provides systematic rules and plans. Palladio had a profound influence on European architecture by reinterpreting the forms and ornament of ancient Roman buildings. Palladianism is architecture derived from the writings and the buildings of Palladio, which is based on the symmetry, perspective, and values of the formal classical temple architecture of the Greeks and Romans. Inigo Jones brought the Palladian style to London, which is first with the Queen's House pictured on the left, and many other works throughout London. For example, the Banqueting House and Whitehall Palace, pictured on the right. Inigo Jones was an English architect in the late 16th century and was the first to use Vitruvian rules of proportion and symmetry in his buildings, which he was inspired by Palladio. Londoners enjoyed Palladianism more than the Baroque style that was dominating Europe because of the more simplistic ideas that were highlighted in Palladianism. Regency London took place during 1795 to 1837. It is the era of London when Prince Regent, also known as King George IV, ruled in place of King George III because he was deemed unfit to rule due to illness. Prince Regent was a patron of art and architecture, bringing new construction and refurbishments to the city of London, reflecting his interests. Prince Regent brought to London a new sense of culture and refinement, which reflected his lifestyle and opposed his father's, King George III. Prince Regent and John Nash created Regent Street and Regent Park, both of which reflected this new luxurious style and taste of Regency London. The style of architecture in Regency London is defined as Baroque with a touch of Palladian. The city as a luxury. Civilizations of the past regarded cities as neither shameful nor inevitable, but as deliberate creations worth making sacrifices to build, maintain, and embellish. Luxury was made because of agriculture. Wealth was extracted from the land, forests, and seas to allow cities to function. With the rise of the Industrial Revolution, cities began producing more wealth than they consumed. London engaged in the Industrial Revolution and achieved its present outward appearance more in defiance of industrialization than as its consequence. Scholars of the time perceived the city as the largest work of art possible. London was the ideal metropolis while under the national glory of Prince Regent, also known as King George IV. Imperial London was an artistic creation intended not only to give pleasure but to contain ideas, values, and serve as an expression of morality. At the same time, London was becoming an economic and cultural center for the world. By the 19th century, London was one of the three largest cities in Europe, along with Paris and Vienna. Citizens of London enjoyed a flourishing economy, which led to high housing standards and an increase in the consumption of luxury goods and indulgences. For example, Hyde Park in London was constructed by Henry VII. The park during this time was surrounded by luxurious housing. It was a commonplace for citizens of London to spend their leisure time. The city as a monument, remaking the city. London has always had monuments, commemorating rulers, idols, and military victories. But in the 19th century, did the city actually become a monument? Monuments are generally built to invoke a feeling of fear or wonder in the viewer, while commemorating rulers, idols, and military victories. London was quite modern in appearance because of the fire of 1666, which had destroyed the original city, allowing for a more uniform and modern reconstruction, opposed to Paris and Vienna. The new streets and squares that connected the city were symmetrical and rectilinear in design and spacious in layout. London was the largest and richest city in the world and was the first city to begin a program of reconstruction. The building of Regent Street and the formation of Regent Park led the way for large coherent land developments that created uniform areas of London. Regent Street was the beginning of a program of reconstruction that improved the overall look and function of the city of London. In an attempt to make London look as rich as the city was, grand streets and parks were constructed with public buildings reflecting the wealth of the city. Even with government intent to improve the public look of London, the impulse to monumentality was being expressed in private buildings rather than in public improvements, most notably in commercial structures in the city. The city is at home, the row house. The English prided themselves on their intense love for their home. The pride came from owning their own home, which gave off a strong sense of individual personality. Houses in London were typically standardized in form and layout, except luxurious mansions owned by the wealthier aristocrats. The London house was the standardized home for the most citizens of London. Built in long uniform rows, the architecture didn't vary between each house, and they all had the same facade. The typical London house consisted of 6 levels, including the ground floor and the basement. The basement was the workshop for the man, the ground floor was the public area, and the top floors were bedrooms, the nursery, and the servants' quarters. The people of London enjoyed more private parts of living rather than public. Therefore, the public rooms got smaller and in the London house, and the private rooms became more abundant as the row house evolved. The city as a playground, hidden pleasures. London and its people had a quality of looking inward and focusing on themselves. English society at the time was very distrustful of one another. Clubs began to form, a place that offered food and relaxation away from home. The club was a place where people of the same class could be in one another's company and feel exclusive and wealthy. Clubs were a place for young bachelors to reside before they had families to focus on, such as the Army and Navy Club of London. The abandonment of family values and the emphasis on consuming material goods were bolstered by the development of clubs. Hotels like the Grosvenor Hotel in London, restaurants, and coffee shops became more commonplace in London. Citizens would escape the privateness of their home and be around people of their same class, while enjoying a fine meal or coffee. These establishments were places of luxury and art, as the structures were decorated to display the wealth of the city and its people. The city as a document. London, being a capital city and a city of great importance, shows what the 19th century considered beautiful. A painting or a house built for someone would reveal their personal ideas and interests, but London's public buildings reflect the aesthetic values of the 19th century London. Large layouts of Regent's Park and Belgravia Square brought with them an aesthetic to the buildings surrounding the park and the square. This shows the embellishments and detail that people in the 19th century London found beautiful. In London, the idea that architecture was a language capable of expressing complex and important ideas surfaced and were directed to serve the public good and private morality. London as a city embodies history through the architecture, art, and technology that was prevalent in the 19th century and is still prevalent in modern London. The city shows the different periods of aesthetic, from Gothic to Neoclassical to Gothic Revival. London can be viewed as a document to these time periods through the architecture showing how each one shaped and changed the city. Also, how London holds a variety of different architectural styles within the city, acting as a document because it is a means of studying another time. On the left, the National Provincial Bank, an example of Baroque, and on the right, the British Museum, an example of neoclassical architecture. Here are my 5 terms. And, moving on to technology during the time. During this time period of London, building with iron and glass became more common because of the technological improvements. Constructed in Hyde Park in London, Joseph Paxton's Crystal Palace was constructed for the Great Exhibition of 1851. The Crystal Palace was made up of cast iron and sheet glass structures, all of which were mass-produced, requiring no special parts. The Crystal Palace was built modular and was composed of cast iron columns holding up the structure with glass lining the entire structure. Joseph Paxton achieved a technological advancement with the Crystal Palace by using standard-sized cast iron and glass to create a massive structure that was able to be built in a timely manner compared to other structures at the time. Canals and waterways. The Industrial Revolution in London demanded an economic and reliable way to transport goods and commodities in large quantities. Water transport at the time was more advanced than land transportation, therefore canal waterways were created to fulfill the needs of the Industrial Revolution. The series of canals created all connected to the River Thames and reached into the industrial and dock areas of London. This technology of using canals to transport goods efficiently allows London to grow in the Industrial Revolution and grow as an economic center of the world. Regent's Canal borders the north end of Regent's Park and is a section of the Grand Union Canal which runs from North London down the city centre into the River Thames, which was one of the main waterways in London. And here's my bibliography.